We only know that 2 car companies will survive over the next 20 years. And Tesla.
Seriously? We all know that?
Yeah.
All of these companies are like, I don't know, 10x of Tesla, and they're the same market cap.
Yep. Dead, alive.
That's simple.
Yeah.
When you run out of luck, need to get unstuck, so go off. When you're up against the wall and you cannot fall, so go off, go off, go off.
Nobody else on Wall Street talks anything like this, but Nick Colas isn't like anyone else on Wall Street. Colas knows the automotive market inside out. From 1991 to 1999, he was the senior equity auto analyst of Credit Suisse. Following Credit Suisse, Colas covered automotive for the legendary Stephen Cohen at SAC, before opening Datatrek to focus on disruptions. Colas knows both automotive and disruptions, and what he said here about Tesla and the OEMs completely blew my mind. I promise it will also blow yours. A quick shout out to my latest patrons, Star Drive and Futurama King. If you haven't done that already, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel if this happens early in the video. You can also support the channel on patreon.com/connectingnodots for as little as $1 a month, so I can keep creating content for you guys and send you my exclusive patron-only newsletter. There's a link in the description. Now buckle up and get ready because we're about to watch a tsunami of disruption, and disruptions are never boring. Let's listen to Nick's latest interview on the excellent The Compound and Friends podcast. Link in the description below.
What has the year been like as a Tesla shareholder? It seems like it's been somewhat frustrating. And we all know that the whole Twitter thing has been somewhat of a distraction, although it hasn't really affected Tesla's ability to deliver. But the stock price is kind of all over the place.
It is.
Okay. What's your take on what's happening there? Because that is now a very important stock to the indexes as well.
Yeah. So I think of Tesla. I think of Tesla in kind of a duality with Apple. And there are 2 different types of companies. Apple is a sustaining innovator, like we were talking about. They constantly improve new products by a little. And this is the Clayton Christensen model of disruption. He calls those sustaining innovators. They just keep trying to move up the value chain, charge a little bit more, create new things, but they don't create new. Tesla is the paragon of new. And you know it from the valuation.
Like revolution, not evolution.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
We already discussed Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma in my video about BMW. As we saw, incumbents try to keep milking the old ways of doing things for as long as possible, so it takes outsiders such as Tesla to develop new technologies which eventually disrupt the market.
Tesla is the paragon of new. And you know it from the valuation. And Tesla's valuation is like $800 billion. So let's just say that we only know that 2 car companies will survive over the next 20 years. Toyota and Tesla.
Seriously? We all know that?
Yeah.
Is that consensus? Is that why Ford and GM sell at 5 times earnings?
Yes. I did a video on this, and I got a call from somebody I didn't know had known for a while, but then lost touch with, who's now a senior guy at Stellantis.
Okay.
This is Chrysler and...
Yeah. Was he like, Nick, can you stop?
No, he said, why does my stock trade for a 3 PE? And I said, because the market...
You ain't Elon Musk, son.
Because the market thinks you're going to be dead in 10 years.
Yeah.
That's the sum total. Same with Ford, same with GM.
Yeah.
That's why you have those. I mean, look, when I covered the group, it was 10 to 12 times earnings.
Yeah.
Now it's 5.
But you're saying you think that's right. You think the market is right.
I think the market's more right than wrong. So the thing about those 2 comps is Toyota trades for, call it 200, 250, 300 market cap.
Outselling Tesla in units by a lot.
And Tesla trades for 8. So there's a gap of 500. So why does the market give Tesla a $500 billion premium to the best car company in the world?
Tweets.
No, brand though.
Because they think they're going to be around.
Yeah.
And because of autonomous driving.
Nick sees Toyota as the only OEM to survive besides Tesla. Had someone asked me a week ago about Toyota, I'd tell you no way, because Toyota is dead last in EVs and still talking about hybrid. But Sandy Munro often says that Toyota can turn on a dime. And for the first time ever, I see what he means. Some time ago, Toyota hired Agile wizard Joe Justice to teach them how to become an agile company. When Joe described on X that he was giving workshops for Denso, a Toyota-owned company which is their largest supplier, I joked that they will now appoint a committee for appointing the committee, which will produce suggestions on how to work fast. But when Joe moved full-time to Japan, I figured something was cooking. Last week, we got the first glimpse of what Toyota's working on, and what I saw startled me. Regardless of whether Joe had a hand in it like I assume, and he probably isn't allowed to tell, I now think that both Sandy and Nick Colas are right, and Toyota can turn on a dime. The headlines said that Toyota is working on front and rear castings, but this misses the big news, which also includes a structural battery pack with seats mounted on it, like in the new Model Y, and an unboxed process, like Tesla plans to have for their third-generation platform. Take a good look at this picture and notice how it doesn't just show castings, but fully built front, rear, and middle sections waiting to be married together. We know that Chinese companies have copied Tesla's gigacastings, but this is the first sign we have of anyone copying the unboxed process. So sure, it's just a concept and they don't actually build cars this way, but kudos to Toyota for copying fast.
So why does the market give Tesla a $500 billion premium to the best car company in the world? Because they think they're going to be around.
Yeah.
And because of autonomous driving.
Okay. And none of the other companies are going to adopt the same technology that Tesla does?
Look at what happened with charging, right? Tesla developed a charging system.
They won that war.
And they won that war.
They beat the government, right? I think the federal government wanted a certain standard.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be Tesla's instead.
Right. So imagine that as a little tiny slice of a story and then put AV technology on top of it. Same kind of thing. So you have Apple being sustaining, Tesla being disruptive. And I always chart like how's Tesla doing over 50 days versus Apple? And the peak for Tesla relative to Apple was end of July, right at the peak of the S&P.
Wait, is there a world where GM and Ford write down their investments in their own self-driving and just adopt FSD from Tesla?
If they can't develop it, sure.
Well, I mean, it's conceivable.
Absolutely.
Nick gets it. He is well aware of Tesla's lead in autonomous driving and believes that other car makers will use it instead of developing their own.
Okay, so that is why those stocks are being so severely discounted, is that there's like, at this point, survival risk. How does that square with GM having to negotiate with the union every 2 or 3 years? And I mean, it's because Tesla doesn't have to do that. So is it just innovation, or is it just like, look at all the natural advantages this newer company has versus the incumbents? It's got to be a part of it, right?
It's definitely a part of it. Like I used to go to Solidarity House in Detroit, UAW headquarters, when I was an auto analyst. And it's a different world there. And that's the world that GM and Ford and Chrysler have to interface with.
Still. Forever.
I think there's going to be a strike.
They also have to deal with the dealerships.
Yes.
Which is a whole other can of worms that Tesla's not dealing with.
Look, if you do like a classic Porter analysis of the car companies, they have pressure from every single part of the Porter square. Suppliers, customers, dealers, substitutes, competitors.
Well, now Elon's putting more pressure on them. So I'll be curious to hear your take on the rapid price cuts. The Model S started the year at $105,000. Now it's down to $75,000. I mean, dramatic price cuts on the S and the X. Is this genius, or is this because there's a lack of demand? In other words, is Elon crowding out potential competitors?
He is, because a piece of that 250 of Tesla of Toyota valuation in Tesla comes down to staying alive. You have to be relevant. You have to continue to hold your market share, because if the next phase of the game is autonomous, you have to be there at the end of EVs to get to autonomous. So he has to maintain and grow market share.
So does this signal this? So this does not signal desperation, lack of demand. This signals he's playing from a position of strength.
He is.
Porter's 5 Forces is a model used to analyze an industry's weaknesses and strengths. Analyzing OEMs through this lens, Nick shows they are squeezed from all directions. Competition is high, with most OEMs running in a tight pack and Tesla just clobbering them. Potential for new entrants is huge, with startups such as Rivian and hordes of Chinese companies waiting around the corner. The power of suppliers is also high, with a few battery companies dominating worldwide battery supply. The power of customers is even worse, as these customers are car dealers, which in many cases have monopolistic power over the OEMs, and unless paid a lot, don't really want to sell EVs. And the threat of substitute products is huge, as EVs will soon kill the OEM's main business, which is selling cars with internal combustion engines. In other words, the OEMs are screwed 6 ways till Sunday.
He's playing from a position of strength.
He is. Look, the auto industry globally is one of the most horribly structured industries I have ever seen.
Yeah.
Because literally everything that can go wrong with an industry goes wrong.
Yeah.
Mostly overcapacity. I mean, the global auto industry has capacity for 40% more cars than there is demand.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And partly they're a victim of their own success. They've made the car, as we were talking about before, they've made it so that the cars last longer.
Yes. So your scrappage rates go down, and so your replacement rates go down.
Right.
John, can we chart on, please, to Nick's point? This is from Drew Dixon, who is a value investor. He likes to talk about Tesla. Okay, he said, in these now famous charts comparing Tesla's fundamentals and market cap to other automakers, we're looking at automaker market caps in one chart, and Tesla is now, market cap-wise, as large as Toyota, BYD, Porsche, Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, Honda, Ferrari, Stellantis, and GM. The next chart is revenue. All of these companies are like, I don't know, 10x of Tesla, and they're the same market cap.
Yep. Dead, alive.
That's simple.
Yeah.
No other analyst says it this clearly. Let's hear again why Tesla's valuation is like all others combined.
Dead, alive.
That's simple.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Wait, hold on. When you say dead, like literally?
That's what I want. Like bankruptcy dead or just like moribund businesses that never grow?
Melting ice cube or out of business?
When the economies of the world are okay, they can survive. It's the next 2 recessions that will kill them.
Why?
Because demand goes down for autos roughly 30 to 40% in a recession. And that's when you lose the ability to have free cash flow and reinvest. And if you're having to reinvest for EVs, you lose all that cash flow. So you slowly slip away.
Nick, a normal industry would consolidate given this picture and given these multiples. Not that it would necessarily save them, because we've seen that with the airlines, we've seen that with steel companies, but like these companies seem to be like very fiercely their own brand, their own world. It doesn't seem like any of them would really have that. Like, I'm just going down the list. Stellantis is a bunch of mergers, so put that one aside. Nobody's buying Ferrari. Ferrari, by the way, the stock is fine. I almost would argue it's a luxury good.
It is.
It doesn't even belong in this.
Yeah.
Okay. Honda, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, Porsche. These are, I don't know, 75 to 100-year-old brands. They're not doing deals with each other to survive. They don't look at the situation they're in as a survival situation.
Yeah.
Is that just because it's too early for them to even be able to understand what's happening to them?
I think they all feel they would need to try. They had to try. And particularly like Ford. Ford is still family controlled.
Yeah.
And the family wants to have that brand. Look, GM had the wisdom to sell their European operations years ago. Ford still runs Ford of Europe because the family doesn't want to let go of the franchise in Europe. Okay. So there is a lot of tension there.
The Japanese companies don't come here and acquire U.S. automakers. They just sell autos.
Right.
That's all they need to do. Like, you're not going to have that kind of cross-border thing to the extent that you would expect in this industry environment.
And to your point, culture is a huge point. Like, one of the last things I did at First Boston was we were the advisor to Chrysler when they sold to Daimler.
Yeah.
And that was one of the worst mergers of all time.
I remember. Was that in 98?
Yeah.
I remember that.
One of the worst mergers of all time. And the cultural differences between the two businesses were profound.
It's like Lee Iacocca, Chrysler.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Bob Eaton was the chairman at the time, but he'd taken over from Lee.
But it was Lee. But it was like Lee's culture that he had built.
It was Lutz's culture, really.
Yeah,
this hard driving car guy. Do the right thing, advertise, market the hell out of everything.
Yeah.
Versus Daimler, which is we make the best cars in the world.
Yeah.
And that just never worked, and it was so obvious from day one, and it never got better.
Nick, traditional value investors look at that chart that Drew just threw up, and they can't understand in what world this makes sense. You obviously have a background in automotive, so you understand where this is. Do you think that most auto analysts would agree with you, or would they agree with the value investors, or is it somewhere in between?
I think they would want to agree with the value investors because the stocks are cheap. And there is a pathway, which I think you outlined, where the world can reassemble itself so that some of these companies can survive and create shareholder value. But because of those limitations you talked about, cultural, technological, the chances are very unlikely.
I want to ask you, I remember 5 years ago, the knock on Tesla was that you don't understand how hard it is to manufacture cars at scale. They've never done it. This is the PayPal guy. He's never built shit at scale. He has no idea how to do it. And that's why GM and Ford are going to be the winners of the electric revolution, because they might be late to the game, but they know how to make a ton of cars and sell a lot of cars. That narrative during the pandemic went out the window. Elon out-executed. Like, say whatever you want about him and his tweeting, or I don't care about any of that stuff. He did figure out how to be a really good car manufacturer, and he did that better than the incumbent automakers figured out how to be as revolutionary as he is. In other words, he did a very hard thing that nobody thought he could do. And for me, that's when the narrative on Tesla changed on a dime. It's It's what a lot of the shorts weren't counting on. He started shipping a lot of cars. I remember he did an interview with Kara Swisher after he had spent like 3 months sleeping in the manufacturing facility. And maybe some of that was played up, but the guy figured out how to make and sell a lot of cars.
Yeah.
And so once he was able to do that, then the incumbent's advantage of, for decades, we've been producing millions of cars, that was gone. So then what was their advantage? I feel like that was the moment where the writing was on the wall.
You're right. And yes, you're right. The challenge, like you go through an auto plant and just like the paint booth, a paint booth is $1 billion of CapEx. Like there's no room for error. You have to get that right.
What's a paint booth?
The paint booth is where a raw car in steel goes through and gets painted. And it's an incredibly complex process. And it's because of emissions and regulations, it's also a very expensive process. And getting it right, you can notice like Tesla doesn't have that many colors in their portfolio. There's a reason for that. It's a very complex process.
Ah, interesting.
So even just that, and you're right, to produce at scale is tremendously hard.
Yeah.
And he did it.
They didn't think he would be able to teach himself to lead the firm to be able to do it.
I didn't think he could do it.
Well, most people didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what the hardcore car guys got mostly wrong. That somebody could come out of nowhere and actually produce enough cars to sustain the business.
Yeah.
Like nobody said that he couldn't design a great car, but like it was obvious that
They
he
didn't
could.
think he could deliver enough.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the big change.
Remember, for a time, they were making cars in tents,
Yes.
right? In
Whatever
a
it
tent,
took.
like a massive tent.
Yeah.
And it worked out all right.
Making EVs is very different from making internal combustion cars. Nick Colas realizes that, but many OEMs did not. They underestimated Tesla and mocked it instead of scrambling to copy its tech, and their hubris will bring them to the grave. From here on, they discussed other topics. But Tesla isn't just a car company, so with DOjo in mind, listen to this.
Look at this chart from Goldman. This is World Technology compared to the World TMT and the World XTMT. And technology is just in another universe.
Yeah. That's the world.
That's World Technology. This is earnings per share, by the way.
Yeah, so I pulled
Not even price, earnings per share.
So I pulled a couple of numbers from this chart. So in MSCI World, the top 5 names, global stocks, everything, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, NVIDIA. They are 14% of the market cap of all stocks in the world.
Yeah.
And that's why.
So there is now an emerging way of thinking about this where we're not talking about the chip level anymore. Now we're saying 1 unit of compute is actually a full data center. Seriously, like the data center is the computer. If that's the realm that we're going into, and it increasingly feels like we are, I think that upends a lot of what we used to think about when we traditionally tried to value companies in this ecosystem, because there aren't going to be 50 companies running their own data centers. They're just too expensive. So we have reached a point where only a few companies are going to be able to actually compete in this world. They're going to largely have this to themselves. So if the unit is no longer the chip or the computer or even the server, the unit is actually the full data center. And that's how we're starting to think about this. I think a lot of people are going to have to get more comfortable with technology companies that trade 30, 40 times earnings and could conceivably grow 20% plus for a decade to come. Unless all of a sudden we all just decide we're not interested in making progress anymore. And everything everything is good how it is right now. Let's just stop. That's the only thing that can stop where I think this is all going. So I don't know how that factors into Moore's Law, but I do know that when I listen to technologists on podcasts, this is now the way they're talking. The GPU doesn't matter. The data center filled with GPUs is the difference maker and is the thing that's going to drive spending and CapEx and R&D. And that's like a whole new ballgame.
The entire podcast is recommended. We'll end with a story they gave about Elon, but before that, please remember to subscribe and hit the like button. Consider supporting me on Patreon from as little as $1 a month. And let me know below which OEMs you think will survive, and whether you believe Toyota will be among them. You can follow me on X, where I am connecting no dots. And until next time, I am connecting the dots, and you are amazing. And now let's hear the Elon story.
Elon Musk meeting Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, at the bar at the Rosewood Hotel on Sand Hill Road, and having this conversation where if we don't get all of the scientists in the room right now and come up with an alternative plan, Facebook and Google are going to own the future. They will literally own AI. And that fails. They have all these technologists and they try to get them to quit Google, quit Facebook. This is a true story. They try to get them to quit and come join this OpenAI foundation. And the scientists are like, are you kidding me? They're spraying me in the face with money. And I'm working with the top scientists around the world. Why would I leave? So they start with that idea of like, why did there need to be an OpenAI? And then you get into ChatGPT. But all of this is to tell the NVIDIA story of today.